From the paranormal to the extraordinary, from the weird to the wonderful, this is On the Odd.
Special guest for you, coming from the other side of the planet, in Australia. I want to welcome Rodrigo. How are you, Rodrigo?
Yes, good, thanks.
Good.
Mark, how are you? Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh yeah, anytime, man. You made a post on one of the Montauk Project documentary. I'm forgetting the title of the documentary right now.
The Montauk Chronicles.
Yeah, the Montauk Chronicles. And I was wondering, I saw you'd made a post about different types of, I'm going to just call them deep meditations, but I don't know if you would call them that. And I just thought it was very interesting, so I reached out to you, and we were, kind of talking back and forth through Facebook. And it seems like you're very involved in these I guess meditation exercises. How would you define what you do?
Yeah, okay. So there's two types. There's meditations and then there's visualizations. Mm-hmm. So I would classify meditations as receiving information and I would imagery and visualizations. And
I'm sorry,
the opposite.
You just dropped out. I'm sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it came back. I guarantee this has something to do with the fact that we have so much distance between us.
Possibly.
This also happens a lot on the odd whenever we bring people on. I feel as though it's the dark forces getting in the
some
way.
Sort of control system.
Sure.
Perhaps. Maybe a lot of energy.
It definitely could be. So I guess if you could just tell me the last part again, that'd be great.
Okay, so basically meditations is receiving information, visualizations is sending out information. So creation of imagery would be the visualization aspect.
So you're creating images in your head, but they're not in your head because these are things that are real to you. These are imaginary.
Of course. Well, they're visualizations. So what I visualize, I call them archetypes. And the archetypes have colors and they also have sound vibration. Now, the sound vibration is a little bit harder to visualize unless I know what the actual vibration or the sound or the tone of the symbol makes. But what actually happens is I visualize a certain symbol at the pineal gland, and then attain a certain color to it, and then visualize what sound it makes. Now, the reason why it's at the pineal gland is because the pineal gland is directly connected to the subconscious, and it's also directly connected to hyperspace. Now, I don't know if any of your listeners know or heard about Stewart Swerdlow or the Montauk Project, as you mentioned before. Hyperspace is the level of reality where everything exists. It's everything. So it's what, let's say, I would say the mind of God sees or hears or feels or interacts with from its point of view. So the hyperspace is a level of reality that consists of archetypes or symbols, colors of those archetypes and symbols, and sound vibration or frequency. Now, yeah, go on.
No. It's a very interesting, I guess, method, or I practiced something similar years and years ago with different types of. I just would call them deep meditations.
Sure.
But that's how I kind of came across Stewart Swerdlow. I worked in kind of a new age metaphysical bookstore, for lack of a better description. And that's how I kind of came across, David Icke, Swerdlow, and these people who do have these kind of forward thinking beliefs in this.
Right.
I mean, these are, David Icke and Swerdlow are two completely different types of people, but I group them together because they're forward thinkers. And it is interesting because I feel as though this type of belief in kind of tapping into this interdimensional existence that is right next to us, and that's the way I visualize it. It's becoming more and more it's popping up more and more lately.
It's becoming more mainstream in a way, isn't it? It's like in the future, I can sense that discussion of perhaps religion is going to be the non-mainstream discussion, and people are discovering that perhaps God is not out there, but it's actually everything that is, and it's part of everything. And I mean, my personal philosophy has extended and gone a little bit further than from what I studied from Stewart. But I've experienced that I'm an aspect or an angle of, let's say, a diamond, and let's say the whole diamond is God, or I call it the divine now, because God to me has the connotations of religion and whatnot. But I'm an aspect of God experiencing for God, so that God can know itself in the point of view of Rodrigo. So I'm not saying I am God. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I have an aspect of it, and that's why perhaps maybe in the Bible, and I'm not sure in the Quran or Torah, it says that God, man is made in God's image. It's like a hologram. It's an extension of itself. And what I find is that perhaps it may know everything. Let's say you know what an orange tastes like, but do you know what it really tastes like without you actually tasting it? Like someone can tell you it's sweet and has this texture, but unless you taste it, you don't know. So that's why I believe we are experiencing so that God can experience through us, so that it can know everything. And therefore, that opens a possibility of infinite realities where every decision and every choice has been played out and made, so that to know everything, it must experience everything. And it becomes, the experience makes it richer, makes the knowing of it more intense and more solid foundation. So it's not just good knowing, but it's better by experiencing. So what I did with the archetypes a while back, and this is before I came to these sort of recent conclusions, is that multidimensionally and alternate realities, you can access those levels by certain visualization and meditations, and I suppose that's why you contacted me, because that's what I had experienced in 2009. I have not tried it since, because I found that when I did it in 2009, I didn't realize that it could have been a one-way ticket and not being able to return. Now, your listeners are probably thinking, did I go into a dimension or a reality where they were flying cars? And then, it was nothing like that. The best way that I can say it was a shift of frequency of reality where I experienced nuances that were intricately different than my previous experience of that sort of reality. So let's say that you have a rainbow and you've got 7 colors, and each color is a reality. Now, a parallel reality would be the color sitting next to it, but the color sitting next to it is not so different that it's like there's a different president of the USA, or a nuke didn't go off in the 40s, with Hiroshima and whatnot. It's not so different that it's that, It's
right. It's
so
not.
different that
It's not so dramatic that it's
right.
unfamiliar, but it might be something that's kind of strange. Kind of.
That's right.
You had sent me a page where the person was talking about how everything seemed to have been upgraded to appear better somehow, and he couldn't put his finger on it exactly.
Well, that was me.
Oh, that was your post? I wasn't sure if that was your post.
Yeah, so what I was experiencing was brighter colors. It's like my vision had improved. Pollution was a little bit was less intense, so the air was clearer, the sun was brighter. Cars weren't futuristic, but they seemed like cleaner. They were very. It was like very kept up nicely. It was like everything around me seemed so pristine. Mm-hmm. Now, when I was experiencing this, what I'm saying is the reason why I thought it was something different was because my intention of the visualization was to enter an alternate reality. So that's why I'm saying that's probably what happened, because that was my intention. Mm-hmm. Of course, people around me thought I was getting unwell, and that's okay, because I most likely was appearing unwell. But to me, I felt okay. I was okay. Everything was fine. But I started seeing people's eyes glowing, even through the TV, which was kind of strange because that's not what's actually being captured. It was like I was connecting on a different sort of level. It was new to me, and so a lot of things I was experiencing a lot of fear with it, because I didn't know what I was sensing or what I was, why there were so many changes. For example, my wife's hair had grown about 1 or 2 inches. It also had this tinge of a violet or purple sort of hue to it. And
these were just the things that you noticed that were different.
Yes,
I mean, there had to have been other things.
Of course. I mean, well, I can only mention what I've noticed, so you don't know what you don't know. So it was decided that because of everything I was saying to my wife, said, "Oh, look at this, do you see that?" And he goes, "Yeah, that's normal." And I'm like, "Hold on, it wasn't like that yesterday." And it was decided that I should see someone, and I was, of a psychiatric team, and they came and I went to the psychiatric ward, and this is what was really bizarre. All the equipment in the hospital seemed very toy-like. It didn't seem very, let's say, it didn't fit the present moment of 2009. It seemed like, when you go to a general practice and they've got a corner with all the kids' toys and the little kids can play with those toys, that's what all the equipment looked like. It was like they were all holding toys. And I was just thinking to myself, this is really bizarre. They were putting these things like the thermometer in my ear, and it was looking like a toy. The testing here in my heart, it looked like a toy. And so because I was verbalizing this, I was heavily medicated.
Right.
And then this is the odd thing, that it went the other way. So everything looked futuristic except in a hospital. Now, as I was getting better, my reality started to change, where everything around me looked very haggard and very...
Right, went the other way.
It went the other way. It was disgusting. It was like cars were on the side of the streets with the bonnets up, wheels were off the cars that I can remember. It was just like... Have you seen Back to the Future 2 when Marty goes back in time?
Yes.
And the reality change was like horrific. It was like it was just dirty, polluted. That was exactly what that was like. And this was the same area that a week or two before was pristine, was clean, was just like, totally opposite. But what the interesting thing was, back in the hospital, it seemed like they were upgrading all their gear, because everything looked Star Trek-like. like the thermometer in my ear was brand spanking new. It looked very high tech. Things I've never seen before. And it's like, what is going on? It's like, so I was trying to describe and write down what I was going through. It seemed like, let's say I'm on this reality level, which I'll call level 0. Then I go to say level 1, which is nice and pristine. and okay. The medication probably affected my pineal gland, because that releases DMT, and I think that's what was the result here. It was the effect of the chemical DMT, which allows you to perceive these sorts of things. Because of the medication, it brought me back down to level 0 where it plateaued, but then it went further and made me go under to -1, for example. And that's where things looked really crap. But I was trying to understand why the hospital was such a different environment. It was like the opposite of what was outside. So in a futuristic world, the hospital stuff was all backwards, but in a backwards world, the hospital stuff was futuristic. I took a long time to discuss and research into that, and it was probably because it was a spiritual sort of experience in the sense that medicine is a new sort of invention in a way, and it's not congruent with spirituality. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you kind of saw it as you did reference the hospital as a lot of very plastic. It was a very, you described a lot of the materials and tools that they used to look like children's toys.
Initially, that's right. But then when I was in the other reality, which is after the medication kicked in and was sending me the other way, when the outside world seemed very negative, the hospitals looked futuristic, and they weren't kids' toys anymore. They were very, as I said, they were updated. They were clean, and they weren't kids' toys anymore. It's like my perception totally changed. So this is the thing: did I change, or did my reality change, or was it just my perception? I'm thinking that it's a bit of both, because the reason I say that is because my intention was to go into an alternate reality with the visualizations that I did for a good 24 to 48 hours. The reason I also say that my perception changed is because I was experiencing things that were similar to what someone would go through when they go through mania. I started to eat a little less. I was exercising a lot more. It was a mixture of both.
Now, do you feel as though this is the experience that you had was something that you literally snapped out of, or was it a gradual?
No, it was gradual. It was gradual.
And are there still remnants of that?
No. Okay. I feel like I'm back to the original. Let's say if I did shift in reality, I'm back to the original one.
And let me ask you. So you said that when you meditate, you choose a symbol, and you meditate on it to your pineal gland. Now, why the pineal gland?
Well, as I said, the pineal gland is the organ that's directly connected to hyperspace, or the level of God that's everything. So, and because if we had no pineal gland, we would not have that connection.
I see.
Okay. And the reason you put out the pineal gland is because you're directly accessing hyperspace when you do that. So because hyperspace is symbols, colors, and sounds, if you visualize a symbol that you want to achieve a certain thing, you visualize that at the pineal gland and you bring it into the reality you're in right now.
Well, I know that the pineal gland has also been called, or it's been related to the third eye. I guess it's possible if you achieved what you wanted, that you feel as though you really achieved something, it could be that you were viewing this all through, your mind's eye, your third eye.
Yes. And that's I was looking at it from an angle of, let's say, a scientific point of view, whether I was releasing more DMT, the chemical that's released by the pineal gland, giving me that experience. And it could have been that my reality had not changed at all, and because I was activating my pineal gland, my third eye, I was seeing something that I wouldn't normally see through my normal vision. I was experiencing something that I was probably seeing through a filter that was placed through my eyes and through my senses, so that I could have a different experience.
And you still do these exercises, right?
No, not those ones. No, As I said, it was a bit scary that it was a one-way trip.
So it spooked you enough to really stay away from, for now.
No, not really. I'm doing different ones. I'm actually doing one now where I visualize a certain archetype at every chakra point, and it's actually to merge my reality with another reality that I'm in where I exist, because other realities exist that I don't. So the visualization is I now merge myself with a version of myself from a universe that I exist where I am so-and-so. So I could say whether I'm a powerful mentalist or a psychic, whether I'm wealthy. The problem with doing this exercise is that if you do it just before you go to sleep, you have the most wickedest nightmares, horrific nightmares.
Oh,
and I'm saying not just like a normal nightmare. I had one of that. I did it one time about a week ago, 5-6 days ago, and I said that I wanted to merge a version of myself where I'm actually a psychic or a mentalist. A mentalist is someone who's a bit more powerful than a psychic. They're able to manipulate reality, not just see or see the future, but they can manipulate it.
Okay.
Like Stewart, for example. So I did that visualization just before going to sleep, and the dream that I had, there was a group of secret agents that noticed that I was around. They gathered around me and they said, I don't think this guy knows his remote viewing. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I was a bit confused, and this is in my dream. Mm-hmm. Next thing I know, I'm put into this sort of Faraday cage. They place a TV in front of me, and then the most horrific scenes are played out on the TV in front of me. And I, start to freak out because I'm stuck in this cage. I couldn't move. And I'm not going to describe the scenes that were played out in front of me, but let's just say they were my worst fears. Like everything that I could fear, it was just horrific. As I started to wake up, I noticed that I was having this sort of sinking in feeling. I wasn't pulling back, but I was sort of sinking into the scene, and I wake up very petrified.
Of course.
My eyes were fully dilated. It was a weird experience, and I was researching astral projection because I've not done astral projection. I've heard about it, and apparently what I went through is something similar that occurs from what I read. Some people go to sleep, they're projecting astrally, but whilst they're sleeping. And if they enter areas of the planet where they shouldn't be, they get put away, locked up for a little while until they wake up.
Well, I played I say I played around with it, but I really touched upon pretty deeply with astral projection in the 1990s, and there's actually a great book. It's a pretty old book by I believe his name is Oliver Fox. You can find it on like Amazon or something. And when I was a child, I had these kind of memories of I would continuously count things to an infinitive number until I couldn't handle it, or I would imagine things so large that my mind couldn't comprehend the actual physical size. And I would actually, and we're talking like maybe I was 3 years old. These are some of my early memories. And I would actually go into these like trances where my parents thought I was having some type of seizure because I wouldn't snap out of it. But I remember specifically the feeling of this entire thing. So that's a completely unrelated story until I pick up this book by Oliver Fox. And he describes that in order to achieve astral projection, you have to put yourself in a state where you're kind of uncomfortable, and you have to find a stream of infinity. And he describes it almost identical to the feeling I had when I was just a kid. And only one time have I gone all out and tried it, and I feel as though I achieved it and pulled away. Like it got too scary for me. Like it put me in a state, and I feel as though perhaps with your exercise, you didn't get scared. You didn't get spooked. You kept going. And
but what you just said there, I've not heard of that, but I've experienced the same thing.
Really?
I mean, I've not heard of it. Like I don't know who this Oliver Fox you mentioned.
I don't know anything else about
exactly, it. I had exactly the same experience. So I was laying on a couch and the TV was on and it was about 8 p.m. at night and I was like you said, you were maximizing your thoughts so they could get so big or counting to infinity. I was actually running my index finger on my temple, like doing circles, right? And then I'd get to halfway mark and cut across the middle. And then I'd start to think, okay, let's count pi. So I started going 3.14, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if I was saying the right numbers or not, but as I was counting pi, like just saying these numbers constantly as I was drawing a circle on my temple, next thing I know, I realize I'm in a trance and I start astral projecting, but following the twilight of the earth.
Huh.
So, and then I'm following the twilight of the earth, and this is a memory which is a bit fragmented because the next thing that I actually do remember though is hearing people's voices going, "Shut the dogs up! They're making too much noises," and just like people complaining as they were waking up. And I see my house, and the twilight's still following, so I'm right on the edge of the twilight. And as the sun hits the room I was in, I get back in my body and I snap out of it. And at that very moment, my wife slams the door to go to work. She couldn't wake me up, apparently.
Wow.
But it was all like synchronized. It was kind of like, going into my body at the same time as the sun hit the window and into the room as my wife was going to work. But what you said about, counting to infinity, that's what was happening with, when I was counting pi.
Sure, because
I got locked in it.
It's going on forever. I mean, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is a very insane coincidence. I mean, no such thing as coincidence, but
no.
But astral projection. And I mentioned to you, and you had never heard the phrase scrying.
No.
Scrying was the goal.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Scrying was the goal that I set out. Scrying is taking astral projection and actually leaving the galaxy in a way. Like you are traveling anywhere. You can, and you're really doing it. I forget what it's called when you can actually go somewhere else and see the surroundings and then return with that information. It's some form of outer body experience, but that was always what I wanted to achieve, and I don't know. I just got spooked, unfortunately. Okay. But it sounds as though you do know what I'm talking about.
Sorry, repeat that.
No, I'm saying it sounds like you do know what I'm talking about, or you've experienced similar.
I've experienced that. Only I think it was about 2 weeks ago. I had a dream. Again, the dreams. I enjoy going to sleep, not because I get rest, but because the information I receive from my dreams. I had this sort of conversation with someone, and I felt like I was going through a little state of depression where I felt trapped about my current sort of situation in life, and that's why I was doing. I wish I could merge myself with an alternate version of myself where I exist, where I'm rich, or whether I've got money or wealth, and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And in my dream, someone said to me, "Why do you have to wait 60 million years to finally live your life?" And I said, "What do you mean 60 million years?" I said, "Well, that's how your essence is." And I'm like, that was a bizarre bit of information. I wake up and I'm sort of looking at it, trying to look at it logically, 60 million years. So I perceived that, and I'm not saying that's what it is. I perceived that maybe my essence or my soul, or where I started from in the mind of God, was 60 million years ago, and I've been incarnating in different forms ever since to where I am right now.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that was an interesting piece, and that's why I said I love my dreams. I love going to sleep just because of the sort of whacked out sort of thinking and information that I get from them.
I don't dream that much now. I don't know whether maybe I'm just not remembering them.
Yeah, you probably forget.
or they're just not interesting enough to
They're always interesting. They're always interesting. What you should do when you start to wake up is visualize the color brown around you. That holds the current thought longer. So as you start to wake up from a dream, try and visualize the color brown, and you'll retain more information.
That's interesting.
And if some people want to experience something really odd, I can give a little exercise that the next day they're going to feel completely tired. They're just going to be so tired that they know that they've done something mentally that got them that tired. Would you like me to? Okay, so yeah. It's a little basic exercise. So what you do just as you're getting tired and going to sleep. So don't stay up all night. This is not the reason why you're going to be tired the next day. Just go to sleep normal time. Visualize the color gold in and around you, gold, as you go to sleep, and constantly trying to visualize the color gold. The next day you're going to be smashed. You're going to be so tired because what the color gold does is give you spiritual healing. And as you're healing overnight, you're going through a healing crisis. The next day you're just completely tired because you did a lot of mental work whilst you were sleeping. You were actually healing yourself. I avoid gold when I'm trying to go to sleep unless I need some sort of healing because I just can't function the next day. I'm just so tired. That's
but if you do wake up and you're tired, though, perhaps you did need some level of spiritual
well, of course.
corrections.
Of course. I mean, it is for a reason. It's not just so you can feel tired the next day. I mean, it's just like a consequence of a healing. You know, people go through a healing crisis or a detox. They've got to go through the crap before they can actually feel really good. So, yeah, that's something that your listeners can probably try. And, it happens all the time for me.
I'll get a lot of pissed off people who email me. What's your problem?
I do apologize.
It's a word of warning. That's all. So do you regret, I guess, meditating on, as far as you did? And like, if you could do it again, do you think you would have avoided going that far?
No, I would actually, no, I don't regret any of that stuff that I've done.
Good.
Even though I've probably created a bit of discomfort for my wife at the time because she didn't know what was going on. To me, that just verifies that there's something more than just what the five senses actually detect. To me, that's verification that there's something more, something bigger and greater out there, or what I'm actually going to say is actually bigger and greater within us,
right?
That we have access to, and that I believe through things like medication and diet and stimulation of the senses, through TV, sports, reality TV shows, news, to suppress the things that we're totally capable of doing. That goes into another aspect of why I believe that's happening. But in essence, I'll just say quickly, in essence is, there's a group of people that run this show, that run this planet, and they just don't want to lose power. So they're doing everything they can to suppress the spiritual aspect of us. Because if we find out that we are great and powerful beings internally, and that we can achieve anything we want if we really put our minds to it and not be suppressed by everything that's stimulated, that creates stimulation for us to divert us from what we really want to achieve, that'll lose control, lose power, and they get that as a high, as a cocaine addict. Power creates such a high. That's why they love that control. It's not for any other reason that they just get a high from it.
Right.
It's an addiction. So
yeah. So I think that it's I think you've learned a lot about yourself as well as
absolutely,
and the experiences maybe other people, the way you can kind of interpret them and and see. I want to thank you, Rodrigo, for coming on the Odd. Usually I'm not so quiet, but I'm fascinated by what you're talking about, and you managed to shut me up.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. And if any other time you want to have me on, I have some other experiences I can share. But
yeah, that'd be awesome. And even if you want to kind of come on and talk about the Montauk Chronicles, we're having the director on soon. Chris,
oh, fantastic.
Garatino, yeah, I'm always messing up his name. He's actually pretty local to where I live. I live on Long Island as well, and I've been out to Montauk a couple times, and be kind of involved in that on some level.
Okay.
And it's a fascinating story. I don't know if have you seen the Montauk Chronicles?
No, not yet. I'll be getting it next week.
I've seen almost all of it. I have maybe 15 minutes left, and it's definitely a really high production, really, really good. It's an entertaining documentary, and I recommend to everyone the Montauk Chronicles.
Fantastic.
But yeah, I want to thank you again, Rodrigo, for coming on, and hopefully you make the time and come on again.
I appreciate it.
All right,
Look
man.
forward to it.
So I'll
Thanks,
talk
Mark.
to you soon, man. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
It's just a cigarette and it cannot be that bad.
Honey, don't you love me and you know it makes me sad.
It's just a cigarette like you always used to do.
I was different then, I don't need them to be cool. It's just a cigarette and it harms your pretty lungs.
Well, it's only twice a week, so there's not much of a chance.
It's just a cigarette, it'll soon be only 10.
Honey, can you trust me when I want to stop? I can. It's just a cigarette and it's just a memory light.